Hello, and welcome to my portfolio for the MSc in Psychotherapy and Counseling Contemporary Creative Approaches course for HL University. My name is Shehla Khan. I live in Cardiff, and in this video, I would like to briefly explain the following things in support of my application. Part 1 is about me, the roots of my interest in this field. In Part 2, I discuss some creative outputs, for instance, what all I did to pursue my interest. In Part 3, I would briefly go through some inner reflections, and in Part 4, why this course and what I hope to do in future with the knowledge that I gain. So let's quickly begin with Part 1. Part 1. About me, or how I accidentally became an agony aunt. #storytime. You have an idea of how your life would turn out to be, and then comes a defining moment that changes everything you had ever thought about. For me, that moment, or rather moments, came about in 2012 on a micro and macro level. On a micro level, I was witnessing my elder sister suffer domestic abuse from her husband and his family, while I could helplessly watch. On a macro level, India witnessed the brutal gang rape of a 21-year-old medical student that even shook the world. There was outrage and anger. But there were things like, oh, but she was out of the house during the dark hours alone. Or, it's bad, but this is what happens when you wear a jeans or a skirt. Things you know in your heart are wrong, but have no way to defend because you grow up in a society that holds a woman guilty by default if she is out of the house alone or during the dark or simply wearing something fun and flirty, something that she likes. Hell, being a girl by default is an admission of guilt in many societies in the world. When people get angry, they take up arms or raise their voice. When I got angry, I took up books. I went to my local central library and picked every book on gender studies, violence against women, trauma, mental health, and abuse. I had also finished a master's in applied social research skills at my university that year, and I put those skills to use by researching these topics at an academic level. Author Sarah Ahmed describes it as one of those feminist snap moments. I had that moment. After carrying a lifetime of shame and guilt for things that were not my fault, or those of the women around me, I had that epiphany when I gained gender consciousness as well as political and class consciousness. My professional background was that of an MBA in international business with majors in leadership and people management. I decided the best way forward to find meaning in life, to do something about all of this, was to disseminate my knowledge in ways that would reach the ones that needed most. I began writing a blog about these issues, and readers on the internet would find it useful and reach out to me with their problems, seeking advice. This is how I got to be an agony aunt. Part 2 of this portfolio contains my creative outputs, or the solid pieces of work that would reflect my commitment to this field. So first thing was a blog. As I previously mentioned, I began writing about these issues and shared them on social media for a wider outreach. It brought victims and survivors to me with their problems. Firstly, I gained self-awareness about my own issues, and secondly, with my newfound knowledge, I was able to hear people out without judgment, what Carl Rogers calls unconditional positive regard. Thirdly, I realized how rare it is for a person, especially women, to be seen, to be heard, let alone be understood. That brings us to point 2, 500 plus hours of counseling. There are a few ground rules for this agony, distraught person relationship. Number 1 was that at no point do I ever ask any money from anyone. This was completely philanthropic. And number 2 is that I made it clear that I'm not a licensed professional and can only speak from my experience and knowledge. After making this clear, I share my contacts and we speak over the phone or voice notes and texts. I'm proud to say I've done over 500 hours of counseling with these survivors of abuse and trauma. Initially, I thought I would just ask some of these people for their testimonials that I could include in this portfolio for you to see. But then it did not seem right to even expect a testimonial from these people because I don't want them to feel obligated to say good things about me just because I helped them. Therefore, I thought I would rather include snippets of our conversations from when my help really made a huge difference in their life. I cannot express in words how profound this has been to me. This is, I guess, what Carl Rogers talked about as an intrinsic reward. The only reason why 8 years later I still counsel victims as an agony aunt type thing is because I find it extremely rewarding to have that privilege where people share their most vulnerable and painful experiences with me. They trust me enough to share this and seek my advice. To be more clear, my help as an agony aunt includes acting as a resource, putting these people in touch with lawyers, NGOs, their local police, etc., and of course, proper therapists if they need reproductive help or things like that too. In these years, I've been able to develop a small network of people who I'm able to recommend to survivors of abuse. Proud to say that with my help, my mentees got 3 divorces in 2021 and 2 women's divorces are expected in 2022. Third, book. I began writing books from 2012 when I had that feminist snap moment. My first book was called I Want Back My Sparkle. Now that I see it, I cringe so much. The knowledge is on point, but yes, there are things I could have done better. And I guess this is what progress is, because it shows how far I've come and how much I've learned. My last book is called Third World Women, and this is the one I'm most proud of. It is nonfiction, but not an academic book. It covers short stories from my life as a girl living in India and the UK. It has macro and micro level issues that all women and men face, including a chapter on race called Dear White People, contrasting social conditioning of brown and white women in the West. Number 4, guest articles. Since I'm a writer, I often write guest posts on burning issues like violence against women and mental health on some of the world's most renowned media outlets such as The Telegraph, Observer, Huffington Post, News Laundry, Times of India, Rewire, Feminism in India, etc. Number 5, moving arts. With the knowledge and experience I gathered, I had an urge to create more outputs, and in this regard I did 2 things. Firstly, I took a course called Explore Filmmaking by the National Film and TV School in the UK, and I wrote some movie scripts as well. Secondly, I began my YouTube channel in 2016, and in this channel I share tons of awareness videos that help me as a guide and a resource for the people I counsel. Lately, I've gotten into long-form videos, sort of academic commentary on topics like gender, caste, and class politics. The latest video is on women's emotional labor. Part 3, inner reflection. Since I've been involved with helping these people and learning about gender, race, and mental health, as well as writing books, I learned a few things that I can synthesize here for you. Number 1, I gained immense self-awareness, being aware of who I am and what flaws I carry. Number 2, a lifetime of shame that I carried due to being a victim of molestation and things of that nature, I was able to shed, realizing that not me, not any child ever is responsible in a situation like that. Number 3, I gained acceptance of the painful parts of my life that I had been repressing. Number 4, I went to therapy myself for the first time, was diagnosed with PTSD, and learned ways to deal with it in a therapist-advised way. Number 5, I learned what intergenerational trauma was and how I could see it transfer from one generation to another within my own extended family. I realized that after my MBA, after being a lecturer for BBA and MBA students at my university, I gravitated towards counseling. I invested a fair amount of my time listening to these people because, to me, as painful as it is to hear someone cry, it was also cathartic. Earlier, I used to have nightmares witnessing my sister being beaten and my inability to do anything about it. I noticed that after a year or so of dealing with victims of abuse, those nightmares stopped. Somewhere in my mind, being able to help someone, if not my own sister, plucked me free and helped me heal. Number 7, I learned there is depth to people. We judge people on their behavior, but hardly ever stop to think, why is someone the way they are? Understanding people better is key to not just a healthy household, but to healthy democracies. The polarized world that we live in today needs more people who are able to communicate with and understand their opponents. Number 8, a weird thing to realize was that we can't change people. I was raised in a culture which is laden with all those stories of a woman being able to change her man from a pathetic loser, pardon my French, to a responsible and caring man, or some leader or healer who has the power to move people, change people. Doing this agony aunt thing, I realized that that was all nonsense. Nobody can change people. People only change when they want to change themselves. Later, I learned this in Carl Rogers' On Becoming a Person, where he discusses at length that forcing someone to change is futile. Number 9, the hardest part, the most challenging part of counseling is not to judge someone with our own idea of morality. To hear someone out with genuine empathy and help them the way they are ready to receive help, being respectful of their trauma and letting them drive the way instead of the counselor telling them where to go. Part 4, why this course and what I hope to do in the future with it. I come from a country where mental health isn't about health. It's about willpower and motivation to deal with hardship. Unsurprisingly, the marginalized such as elderly, women, children, and the lower-income people are most vulnerable. I've seen young adolescent girls who disagree with patriarchal bullying or are disobedient to their husbands and his family being tagged as cursed or witches or influenced by ghosts. Whether it is depression due to oppression or simple disobedience. When the diagnosis is the influence of ghosts, the treatment is to beat or thrash the ghost out of her by some self-appointed religious monk. Instead of accessing therapy by a licensed professional, people seek help and healing from these crooks. I cannot completely blame the people for this. Access to therapy is 19,000 rupees or 200 pounds per sitting on average in a cosmopolitan city. For an average Indian middle-class person, that is out of reach. Don't even mention lower-income population. Traditional ways of dealing with mental illnesses and disorders thus have been to visit these religious priests who for years keep beating up the patient until they give up on their life themselves or live chained until their families throw them out in the street and they get picked up by some government hospital van sometimes. In the beginning, when I began counseling, I did have that feeling like I was fixing someone. But as time passed, I gained experience and I was able to understand that real psychotherapy is not about fixing people because that implies that your clients are broken. By reading Carl Rogers, I was able to correct myself in that regard. And another thing I struggle with is my frustration when I see a victim go back to their abusive husband when they do that honeymoon phase thing. I try not to be the one to tell them what to do, but for example, once when I did get mildly passionate in my help is when I heard a victim put her widowed elderly mother and her baby at risk at the disposal of the abusive husband who hurt them both. Since there is no child protection services in India who could remove the child from this toxic situation, I had to be stern with her and tell her how she's letting her child get hurt by a man who deserved neither of them. Today, she's divorced and the child is safe, thankfully. I want to take this course so I can learn how to deal with such complex situations with professionalism and precision. If I could do so much, make so much difference without having a license or qualification, how much difference can I make with one? Having counseled for over 500 hours in the past 7 to 8 years, I feel like I have what it takes to be a licensed professional. And with my business management experience, I intend to create a helpline for victims of abuse and mental illness back in India someday in the future. Thank you so much for your time.